In my room, on my desk, sits a black plastic casing which holds my glasses. They have a power of -9, and they were very, very expensive to wear. When I was younger, my mother used to warn me about sitting too close to the television. She used to tell me that my eyesight would get progressively worse and I'd either end up needing glasses or my eyes would simply be bad enough to make me legally blind. Being an overly obnoxious 9-year-old, I never listened. So whenever my favorite cartoon or TV show was on, I would scurry to the living room and rest my head an inch away from the screen. I figured that the closer I got to the TV, the closer I could get to the show. Stupid. Whenever my mother found out about this, she would yell at me about how expensive my glasses would be and that we couldn't afford even a single pair. She then proceeded to slap the back of my head so hard that I would accidentally bite my tongue or unpleasantly acquaint my face with the hard TV screen. It happened every time, and I always ignored her. Until one day, she got to say, "I told you so," and we were forced to get me a pair of glasses. Because we couldn't afford to buy new ones, she took me all over the neighborhood to find a used pair that did the job well enough. And so, it continued until my eyes settled at a power of -9. Finding a used pair of glasses that would suffice was hell. We eventually spotted a proper pair at an antique store. The store was filled with objects and trinkets that could have come straight out of a horror movie. Most of it, including the elderly woman who was sitting behind the counter, looking fit for use by witches. The woman was wearing sunglasses that were much too dark for the dusky little store. My mother asked how much they would cost, and the woman simply replied with, "Very expensive." She seemed to be blind because she never looked at my mother while they spoke about the price, but she stared intently at me. Even as we left the store, I could tell that she was following me with her gaze. It made the hairs on my neck stand on end. Despite being very ugly, the glasses did the trick. She had to work 7 days a week for months in order to earn back what it had cost, but at least my eyesight didn't seem to get any worse. Needless to say that my glasses were a necessity. Without them, I was essentially a baby in a suit. I had to look out for every single little thing so as not to break or otherwise damage this life-saving piece of technology. Eventually, my girlfriend and I grew tired of having to always watch out for my glasses. And so, after a lot of coercing, she managed to talk me into getting laser eye surgery. I can't say that I've never regretted making that choice. It was wonderful seeing things perfectly clear again without wearing my glasses. At first, the discomfort was horrible, but eventually it faded and I got my perfect eyesight back. I felt like a new man, born with the eyes of a god. I'm a sentimental idiot, and so I never managed to throw my old glasses away. Months and years passed until one day, when we were packing our stuff because we were moving to a new town, I stumbled upon the old plastic casing of my massively expensive glasses. Holding them again after such a long time felt strangely nostalgic. They were once incredibly important to me, enabling me to live like a reasonably average human being. I may not have been actually I may have actually shed a small tear or two. And in my nostalgia, I wanted to wear them again. Even for just a little while. Looking through glasses, if you don't need them, is bad for your eyes, but I figured a quick peek wouldn't hurt too much. The moment the pads rested on my nose and the temple tips nested gently behind my ears, I could feel something wrong. My eyesight wasn't distorted at all, despite what I expect. In fact, when I think back, it might have actually improved marginally. Naturally, as any sane person would, I was confused and I wanted to take them off to reassure myself that my eyesight was still perfect without them. But they wouldn't budge. No matter how hard I pulled really fucking hard, I can assure you the pads stayed perfectly still on my nose, and the entire damn thing wouldn't move so much as a millimeter. At this point, I was freaking the hell out. I called to my girlfriend, who had been in the kitchen, packing our cutlery and plates and such, but she didn't reply. At first, I figured she must have not heard me, so I launched myself out of the chair I'd been sitting in, wanting to make my way to the kitchen with all sorts of haste. Beyond the door, however, was a desolate, empty house, where only moments before was a vibrant new home of a loving couple. The previously white wallpaper was filled with holes and patches of mold, and had slanted away from the wall as if it had grown tired of its own existence. Behind the wallpaper were cracks in the wall, as if the house has been abandoned for 100 years. The wooden floor beneath my feet creaked so much that I feared it would cave in. The roof above my head was already partially on the floor. Through the holes in the roof, I could see the sky. Clouds rolled over each other as if at war with themselves. And in the distance, I could see the sun rising, leaving a blood-red stain on the deck of the clouds as it pierced through them like a knife through soft flesh. I called her name again, suddenly fearing for her life. My legs were trembling, but they obeyed me and moved faster than they had before. When I finally made it to the kitchen, it was as empty and decayed as the rest of the house had been. The stench of rot and decay penetrated my nose, my gag reflex automatically setting. Panic and fear mixed in my stomach, and I ran out of the house in a world that was completely and utterly dead. There were no people, no animals, no plants, nothing. There was no sound other than the one made by the wind. I was completely alone in a place that seemed to be rotten and saturated with death. My fear fueled my adrenaline, and with all my strength in my arms, I pulled at the glasses, but they still would not move. I closed my eyes, took several deep breaths, and then punched the contraption of plastic and metal, glass that had glued itself to my face and was showing me the end of the world. I punched until I can feel my face, and my knuckles were raw. Her gasp is what woke me up. She was standing in the doorway with a horrified look on her face, as if her worst nightmare was coming true. It filled me with worry, but the sight of her dampened my fears with love and relief. I crawled on my feet, wanting to wrap my arms around her and hold her. I wanted to make sure that this was real and that she was safe, but she sheeted away from me as if she feared that I would attack her. Her eyes briefly darted over me before feverishly fixating on my face again. I reached out to her again, hoping that she would understand that I wanted to hold her in my arms, but those very arms were covered all over with a red, sticky wetness. I felt no pain, so that must mean it was someone else's blood. Disgust and terror gripped my heart, and I frantically ran my eyes over her entire body while she stood frozen in the doorway. The only thought going through my head was, did I hurt her? Is she all right? And I wanted to tell her that I had no memory of whatever happened, and that I would make sure that everything would be okay. No sound came from my mouth. It was as if there was an emptiness in my throat that swallowed all sound I was trying to produce. I tried talking again, but all I could hear was a low gurgling coming from the back of my throat, followed by the horrific scream that came from the woman I loved. She turned on her heels and bolted away. I started chasing her, ignoring the wet, disgusting feeling on the rest of my body that I had finally come aware of. The stickiness didn't matter. All that mattered to me was to tell her that everything was going to be okay, that I loved her, and that we would make it through this if we stuck together. She reached the front door, pulled it open, and ran up before slamming it shut behind with such a force that it rattled the mirrors in the hallway. I passed them by and glanced briefly from the corner of my eye. Except there were no eyes. 2 caves of rotting flesh stared back at me, oozing blood that crawled down my face and stained my clothes with a dark, filthy red. My mouth opened in horror, but that only made it worse. In my mouth was an emptiness. My tongue had been cut out, and the same disgusting blood was bubbling up all over my shredded lips. I wanted to scream, but I was met with nothing but a gurgle. I stood still for minutes, staring at the horrific creature in the mirror. Its hollow, bleeding eye sockets stared back at me, and in the far reaches of my mind, I wonder, how could this be? How could I see without my eyes? But then I remembered an old woman who wore sunglasses in a gloomy store, as if she were blind. My mind made a connection. Back in my room, on my desk, sits a black plastic casing which held my old glasses. They had a power of -9 and were very, very expensive to wear.